Ujite has watched the world burn 6 times. At the hands of these 4 girls, he's died, failed, and regressed until he lost his humanity. But as he resets the timeline for the 7th time, he's changing the game. This time, he isn't picking up a sword. He's picking up a lease for an apartment. Welcome to the 7th regression, where the only way to save the world is to survive fatherhood. Inevitably, he failed to stop the apocalypse. The red dragon, the incarnation of rage and despair, would always appear to burn the world to cinders. The man, Ujite, closes his eyes against the memory of fire. He had seen this all before. He wonders briefly if listening to her pleas would have changed anything, but dismisses the thought. The beast unleashes its torrent of flame. The world is engulfed in a sea of fire. Ujite stands firm, his expression unchanging in the face of annihilation. The flames wash over him, a familiar, searing pain. Blood sprays. But there is no regret, only the cold, hard certainty of what must be done. He summons his power. It is not a weapon of hope, but of pure, efficient destruction. He calls forth the invisible blade, an SS-rank authority that can cut through reality itself. After 6 cycles in this hellish world, Ujite had come to a single, inescapable conclusion. He cuts through the dragon's breath, the flames parting before his will. He realized that failure, and the blood-soaked experience that comes with it, is everything. He moves, a blur of motion against the backdrop of a dying world. Every swing is precise. Every movement is honed by 6 lifetimes of combat and loss. Red, green, blue. The dragons came in all colors, each a different flavor of catastrophe. For him, they were just obstacles in a cycle he was determined to break. Another strike. Another life taken. It was a brutal, ugly dance he had perfected over centuries of repeated time. The blade connects, a familiar, sickening tear of flesh and bone. Blood sprays across his vision. The blue dragon's form is shattered, its roar silenced by the cold, invisible edge of his power. He lands softly on a pile of rubble, the only solid ground in a sea of flames. He looks out over the burning ruins, the fire of the apocalypse reflected in his empty eyes. He had won this battle, but the war was far from over. A weary sigh escapes his lips. The city burns around him. This is the familiar landscape of his failure. He faces the endless horde. An ocean of claws and teeth and wings. He understands that even if he keeps killing them, they will never, ever stop coming. Then, the cold, impersonal words of the system fill his vision. Planet Earth has entered the abnormal status, apocalypse. You have failed to save the Earth. The universe itself confirms his absolute defeat. But for Ujite, failure is not the end. It is merely the trigger. His unique authority, the orbit clock, activates, seizing the fabric of reality to rewind the world's time once more. Golden light envelopes him, the gears of time spinning backward. He is pulled from the ashes of his broken world, an unwilling passenger on a journey he knows all too well. His eyes, once wide with the shock of regression, now close with grim acceptance. He has seen this all before. 6 lifetimes of blood-soaked experience have taught him one thing. Maybe all that failure, all that pain, maybe it wasn't meaningless after all. Every mistake was a lesson. Every death, a data point. The system announces the broken timeline is erased and the world's time is restarting. Same world, same dragons, but this time, he's not picking up a sword. He's picking up a lease for an apartment. Welcome to the 7th regression, where the goal isn't to fight, but to survive fatherhood. And just like that, the world is reborn, blissfully unaware of the doom that awaits. In the streets of a peaceful city, onlookers point towards the sky, their mundane lives about to be shattered. It starts as a curiosity. A strange, swirling void of purple energy. From GD's perspective, it was like watching lambs notice the first wisp of smoke from a slaughterhouse fire. fear is slow to set in. A woman gets a bad feeling, urging her partner to leave. But human arrogance is a powerful thing, and her pleas are casually dismissed. The man, a fool in every timeline, sees not a world-ending threat, but an opportunity. As monstrous silhouettes begin to form within the gate, he grins and gives a thumbs up, telling his friend to hurry and snap a picture. The woman can only watch in horror. The mundane reality of her world is ripped apart in an instant. Her shock is absolute. Then comes the slaughter. Monsters pour from the gate, falling upon the helpless crowd. In the 21st century, humanity was introduced to the concept of being prey. Knights from another dimension. Beasts from forgotten nightmares. Horrors from the deepest abyss of space and time. An endless tide of monsters began to pour out. In the face of annihilation, humanity found a new flame. Hunters individuals awakened to impossible power. This marked the beginning of a new era. The dawn of the new epoch. Among these newfound saviors were young hunters with exceptional, world-breaking potential. They were gathered on a man-made floating island called Hateling, and began their training there. This global academy city was a fortress. A bastion of hope. The entirety of what was known as Lair. In his 7th life, Ujiri found himself not in a war room, but in the middle of a petty crime. A former superhuman named Joe Hozik, now a common thug, held a terrified woman hostage, his mutated arm a crude weapon against her throat. The local police were useless. They shouted warnings and aimed their pathetic weapons. Hozik just laughed at them, a cornered animal spitting defiance at wannabe cops. Hozik prepares to take everyone down with him. But in the background, a shadow moves. Unseen, unheard, Ujiri approaches with the silence of a ghost. He appears without a sound. No one saw him move. His voice is quiet, yet it carries the weight of absolute command. I said, surrender. Panic flashes in the criminal's eyes. It's an impossible situation. There was no sound, no presence, no warning. Joe Hozik's brain screams in confusion, unable to process how someone had gotten behind him. Jidi's expression is one of profound boredom. To him, this isn't a life-or-death struggle. It's a trivial annoyance, a mosquito buzzing in a quiet room. Hozik makes his move. A foolish, desperate lunge. Jidi simply shoves the hostage aside, his movements too fast for the eye to properly follow. The thug screams, enraged at being called a wannabe. He unleashes a flurry of attacks. Jidi just weaves through them, an untouchable phantom of efficiency, before delivering a single, decisive chop to the neck. A flash of irritation crosses Jidi's face. He is not a wannabe cop. In this life, in this moment, his power is cloaked in the mundane authority of a badge. He answers the insult with action. No fancy techniques, no grand powers. Just a simple, brutal elbow strike that carries the weight of a fallen star. The result is absolute. Joe Hozik is slammed into the pavement with such force that the ground itself shatters, leaving him embedded in a crater of his own making. Jidi looks down at the unconscious form, a slight frown on his face. "Ah." He says with faux innocence, "I lost control of my strength." It was a lie. He had simply forgotten how fragile these people were. Right, he'd almost forgotten the charade. In this timeline, he was Ujite, a mere officer of the Lair Regional Police Department. A role he had to play to get closer to his real targets. The scene shifts to the police precinct. The incident is already news. Joe Hozik, a former superhuman turned human trafficker, had been cornered after a chase. An officer, watching footage of Hozik's unconscious body being taken away, asks the obvious question. If Jidi brought him in, why is the criminal here at their station? Ujidi's response is blunt. Devoid of detail. He was just lying there. He offers no explanation for his sudden appearance or his overwhelming show of force. His female colleague stammers, trying to get him to file a report before giving up. She recognizes the futility. She thanks him for his hard work, but her mind is reeling. She watches him walk away. There's something different about him. It wasn't just his actions, but his entire presence that felt alien. She adjusts her glasses, trying to process the change. Was he always that tall? Had he always been that handsome? The man she thought she knew had been replaced by this imposing, cold stranger. Another officer confronts him, gesturing to the still unconscious criminal on the floor. It's the same complaint, the same mundane problem GD has no time for. Didn't you beat him up too much? What if people complain about excessive force? GD stares back, his expression a mask of pure indifference. The concerns of these people were like the buzzing of insects. For him, who hadn't even bothered showing up to work since this regression started, everyone here was a stranger he was seeing for the first time. They struggle with the subdued criminal while their colleague watches, annoyed at his inaction. Tired of the incompetence, GD takes over. He grabs the criminal by the collar, dismisses his flustered colleague, and handles the situation with the ease of someone swatting a fly. He gave up everything. His normal life, his peace, his very humanity. The reason he bound himself to this agonizing cycle of regression and began his endless war to stop the apocalypse was for them. It was because of the hatchlings. The fate of the young dragons. Once the hatchlings grew strong enough in their other world, Askalifa, they would come to Earth. Not as invaders, but as students, sent to study abroad and gain happy life experiences. But Earth was not kind. Some, like the Red Dragon, were driven mad by the lust for battle, losing control and ending up dead on a blood-soaked field. Another, the Yellow Dragon, was shattered, unable to withstand the constant malice and cruelty poured upon her by humans, her spirit broken beyond repair. And another, the one from his most recent failure, ended her own life, unable to fulfill the mission given to her. He had seen this happen 6 times. He had held her broken body in his arms 6 times. This was the true cause of everything. Enraged by the deaths and despair of their young, the adult dragons began their indiscriminate assault on humanity. The apocalypse was not an invasion, it was retribution. Through countless repeated lives, GD grew so powerful that he could hardly grow any stronger. He became an engine of war, a one-man army against a tide of gods. But it was never enough to protect the world alone. And so, in this 7th cycle, he plans to try a different approach. If he cannot save them by fighting for them, then he will save them by force. His colleague calls out to him, her voice pulling him from his thoughts. A voice from a world he is no longer a part of. She asks him about his plans after work. She mentions a new place she wanted to try, an innocent invitation to a life he can never have. As he drags the criminal's body, the gap between their worlds is made painfully clear. She blushes, asking him to dinner. A normal request for a normal man. But Ujidi is anything but normal. He gives her a blunt refusal, his voice devoid of warmth. Sorry. I've got somewhere I need to be. Confused, she asks where he could possibly be going. He doesn't even turn to look at her. His one-word answer hangs in the air, a declaration of intent, Europe. The scene changes. From the sterile environment of Lair to the sun-drenched streets of Florence, Italy. His new mission begins here. And there she is. Not broken, not crying, not dead. Here, in this timeline, the green dragon Ubom is just a girl, playing happily with children in a park. He watches as she places a crown of flowers on another child's head. An act of simple, pure innocence. This is the version of her he must protect. This fleeting moment of happiness is what the entire world's fate hinges on. He looks at her, his face a mask of cold resolve. He has seen her future. He has witnessed her death 6 times. This time, things would be different. She looks up at him, curious, perhaps a little wary of the tall, intense stranger who has appeared so suddenly. Jidi's expression hardens. The time for pleasantries is over. His voice is absolute, leaving no room for argument, as he delivers the first command of his new plan. You're coming with me. Jidi was met with an anomaly. A girl with hair the color of new spring leaves stood before him, and with a simple word, shattered the monotony of his regression. Hello. For a moment, she looked away. A fleeting vulnerability. In his past lives, Jidi had seen her cry, seen her despair, and seen her die. This quiet girl was a ghost from a future he was trying to erase. A faint, turquoise light began to swirl around her. A language she did not know. A concept she couldn't grasp. The ancient power of a dragon was awakening just to understand a single human word. Her eyes met his again, a small flower now adorning her hair. The skill, collapsed babble, activated, bridging the gap between their languages. With newfound understanding, she returned his greeting, her voice soft but clear. He watched her, his face an unreadable mask. He had lived through ages of blood and sorrow. He had witnessed the end of the world 6 times. A girl in a park was just another variable to be calculated and controlled. She turned slightly, a gesture that was somehow both shy and confident. It was a calculated innocence. Yes, she replied, confirming his suspicion that this was no ordinary meeting. Leaves danced in the wind around them. An idyllic scene. But Jidi knew the truth, this girl was a hatchling, a being with the power to unravel creation, and her cheerful demeanor was a terrifying prelude to a potential catastrophe. She smiled brightly, a picture of pure innocence. It was a perfect mask. In his experience, the ones who smiled so freely were often the most dangerous. They hid universes of chaos behind a simple, disarming expression. His eyes narrowed. A flicker of cold analysis crossed his face. She had asked where she'd heard his name, a name he hadn't spoken. A slip-up? Or a deliberate test? With these creatures, every word was a potential trap. She pointed to the name tag on his uniform, a simple, logical explanation. Jidi. His expression remained neutral. It was a plausible lie, but he knew better. He had seen this all before. She giggled, admitting she was just kidding. A playful deflection. But then her tone shifted, her smile fading into something more serious, a glimpse of the ancient being beneath the childish facade. Her eyes, now sharp with an unnatural perception, pierced through his carefully constructed persona. You're extremely strong, she stated, not as a guess, but as an absolute fact. And you don't belong in a place like this at all. Silence. For the first time, her words struck a chord in the vast emptiness of his existence. He stood motionless, his expression unchanged, but behind those dead eyes, ancient memories of shattered worlds and failed futures began to stir. She tilted her head, her voice laced with a strange mix of curiosity and challenge. So? Are you going to kill me? It was a question born of instinct, the prey testing the predator. A dangerous game to play with a man who had forgotten the value of life. Her eyes widened in surprise. It seemed even she was taken aback by her own audacity. A flicker of genuine emotion. A crack in the mask. She recoiled, flustered, as if suddenly realizing the gravity of her question. Jidi simply observed. Her fear was real, but so was her power. A volatile combination that had ended the world more than once. Without a word, Jidi turned and began to walk away. His part in this conversation was over. The choice was now hers, follow the man who could be her savior or her doom, or be left to face a fate he knew was far worse. The secret to her perception lay in her bloodline. The Green Clan's eyes are said to read providence itself. It wasn't simple intuition, it was the ability to gaze upon the threads of destiny, granting them a situational awareness that surpassed all other clans. And in her eyes, for a brief moment, the human facade fell away completely. The pupil sharpened, becoming a reptilian slit. She was not just seeing him, she was reading the blood-soaked history written into his very soul. He stopped. The air grew cold. He moved with a speed that defied logic, appearing directly behind her, his presence an absolute weight upon the world. He was done with games. Now came the threat. But instead of fear, he was met with a sly, knowing smile. She had anticipated this. Her power had shown her this was an inevitable step in their shared destiny. She wasn't afraid of the predator, she had been waiting for him. The smile remained, a silent declaration of victory. She had tested him, provoked him, and confirmed what her draconic eyes had told her. He was dangerous, yes, but he was her danger. With a soft tap of her heel against the pavement, she pivoted to face him directly. The negotiation was over. Now, it was time for her final response. She winked. She raised her hand. And with a gesture of profound, childish insolence, she gave him the finger, a silent challenge to the man who held the fate of the world in his hands. The gesture was absurd. It was childish. And against a being who had shattered stars and unmade timelines, it was utterly, suicidally brave. Jidi didn't even blink. But her audacity served its purpose. It shattered the tension. In place of threats and intimidation, a simple contract was formed, sealed not in blood, but with the naive gesture of a pinky promise. For now, she would be his guest. And so, the dragon was brought to his nest. A sterile, high-rise apartment indistinguishable from 1,000 others. A gilded cage for a being that could level the city with a single tantrum. The next morning, Ubom awoke. She peeked out from her room, dazed and confused. The world of humans was bright, loud, and utterly alien to her. Dressed only in his shirt, she looked small and out of place. A fragile thing. But Jidi knew that appearance was a lie, within that frail body was the potential for absolute destruction. As she entered the living room, a strange sight greeted her. A shadowy form was dissipating before Jidi, who sat calmly on the sofa. He hadn't just brought her to his home, he was revealing the very nature of his power. It was one of his most useful abilities, Shadow of the Grand Duke. A clone, possessing half of his own cataclysmic power. The perfect tool to maintain his cover story in the outside world while he focused on the true mission, the dragons. The clone, a perfect replica down to the cold, empty eyes, prepared to depart. It would go to his job, deal with his colleagues, and live the tedious life of a normal human, a life Jidi himself had long since abandoned. As the clone headed for the door, it walked past Bom. An entity of pure shadow, a walking echo of the man on the couch, moving with silent purpose. The clone paused, its gaze falling upon her for a fraction of a second. No recognition. No emotion. It was merely an extension of Jidi's will, and she was simply an object in its path. Bom let out a surprised breath. Even her draconic eyes, which could see the flow of providence, were momentarily confused by the existence of two identical, yet fundamentally different, souls in the same room. She turned her attention to the original, the true source of the oppressive aura in the apartment. "Why don't you do your work yourself?" she asked. Jidi's response was to simply turn a page of his newspaper. Her existence was a necessity, her questions were an annoyance. For a moment, she seemed shy, perhaps embarrassed by his cold dismissal. It was another tactic in her arsenal of manipulation. The manipulative genius was testing his defenses. She wasn't so easily deterred. She plopped down on the sofa next to him, grabbing a cushion as a makeshift shield. If he wouldn't engage, she would simply invade his personal space. Hugging the pillow, she continued her one-sided conversation. Jidi had dealt with eldritch gods and blood-soaked demons. He was sure he could endure the chatter of a single, god-powered toddler. She peeked over the cushion, her eyes watching his every non-reaction. She spoke of food, of how eating delicious things makes one happy. A simple, childish desire, yet it was the very thing Jidi was trying to cultivate to lower her despair. He remained silent behind his paper wall. Her words were logical. A happy dragon was a non-destructive dragon. It was a tedious, but necessary, part of the new path he had chosen. This time, things would be different. A smile bloomed on her face. She kicked her feet with glee. His silence was not rejection, it was permission. She had won. She got up and bowed playfully. It was decided. To make her happy, they would start with the most basic of human rituals, sharing a meal. And for that, they needed supplies. A sly, triumphant grin spread across her face. She had successfully maneuvered the ancient regressor into taking her grocery shopping. For a being of her power, it was a ridiculously small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Their destination was S-Mart. A temple of modern consumerism. Jidi felt a familiar sense of detachment as they approached, another mundane task in a life that was anything but. The supermarket was bustling with people. Each of them living their short, insignificant lives, completely unaware that their entire reality was balanced on the whims of the very dragons Jidi was trying to pacify. Inevitably, they drew stares. A child pointed, mistaking BOM for a celebrity. The mundane world was easily captivated by their otherworldly appearances, blind to the terrifying power they both held. The whispers followed them. Women were captivated by Jidi's cold handsomeness, their male companions suddenly feeling inadequate, like squids next to a leviathan. It was a common, predictable reaction he had witnessed countless times across his regressions. Deaf to the murmurs, BOM walked with a cheerful bounce in her step, humming a tune as she took in the mundane wonders of the store. Jidi remained a pace behind her, a silent shadow of indifference, his only purpose to ensure this fragile peace wasn't shattered before his true work could begin. Her joy was a fragile, fleeting thing. She pointed at something in the distance, chattering away about their plans for breakfast. Jidi followed, his steps silent, his mind already on the next phase of his plan. She skipped ahead, her energy boundless. It was almost convincing. Jidi cut through her cheerful fantasy with two cold words. Leave them. The groceries were irrelevant. The joy vanished from her face, replaced by confusion. Huh? Why? She didn't understand. In her mind, the day was simple. In his, it was a complex sequence of calculated moves. His gaze was fixed on something far away. There's somewhere we need to go first. Her happiness was a secondary objective. Her survival and integration were primary. And that required certain arrangements. She looked back at him, her cheerful energy now replaced by a hesitant uncertainty. The predator she sensed underneath his calm exterior was beginning to show himself again. He strode past her without another word, the heavy bags of groceries meaning nothing to him. He was a being of absolute purpose, and right now, that purpose led them away from the bright city streets and into the shadows. BOM was lost. The simple, happy future she had imagined just moments ago was dissolving. One moment, they were playing house, the next, she was being led to an unknown fate by her mysterious, cold-hearted keeper. Their destination was a man Jidi had used in past lives. A forger. The old man greeted them with a grotesque, leering smile, his cybernetic eye glowing with a predatory light. He was a necessary evil, a tool for a dirty job. While the old man worked, BOM posed for her photo, smiling innocently, completely unaware of the grim transaction taking place. Jidi stood behind her, his presence a silent, suffocating threat that kept the forger's lecherous tendencies in check. With the data forged, the next stop was a legitimate front. A clean office, a smiling clerk. The dark dealings of the underworld were laundered into the sterile bureaucracy of the modern state. The process was sickeningly familiar to Jidi. Before giving her the ID, there was one last stop. To a vault of artifacts, relics from his past regressions. He needed to give her a leash. A bracelet, a locator, something to ensure this catastrophic being could never stray too far. He calibrated the device, its holographic interface bathing them in a blue light. Bom watched with childlike wonder, fascinated by the technology. She had no idea she was being tagged like an animal. And then, it was done. A resident registration card. A proof of existence in a world that didn't know she existed. In her hands, she held her new name, UBOM. As they walked, GD explained its dual function. It was her identity, yes, but it was also a hologram locator. He framed it as a safety measure. She saw it as a gift. He saw it as a necessity. She looked up at him, her expression one of genuine surprise. It was a kind gesture. A thoughtful gift. Or so it seemed. The manipulative genius was being manipulated herself, and she didn't even know it. GD's mind drifted. The name wasn't random. It was the first piece of a much larger puzzle. 4 dragons. 4 seasons. This was BOM. Spring. 3 more remained. Summer, autumn, and winter. 3 more catastrophes to tame. Her reaction was better than he could have hoped. She adored the name. Spring. The season of new beginnings. It was a fitting name for a being starting a new life, a life he had orchestrated. She clutched the small plastic card to her chest as if it were the most precious treasure in the universe. In that moment, her despair level, the very metric he was trying to control, plummeted. This was progress. A quiet, happy smile settled on her face. The simple joy of having a name. Of belonging. These were the emotions he needed to cultivate. This was the path to preventing the apocalypse. It was strange, tedious, and profoundly uncomfortable. But beneath her newfound happiness, her ancient instincts screamed. Her draconic eyes saw the truth of him, a being of absolute darkness, a predator cloaked in human skin. Her very soul recognized him as a profound and inescapable danger. She beamed, her joy genuine. Beside her, GD allowed a ghost of a thought to surface. It wasn't a bad start. The first dragon was collared, her despair was lowered. The plan was in motion. As they walked through a park full of cherry blossoms, she contemplated this paradox. Her intuition, the providence-reading power of the Green Clan, was never wrong. And it told her he was dangerous. And yet, GD hadn't harmed her. He had protected her, provided for her, even given her a name. He was a walking contradiction. A monster performing acts of kindness. So, she would watch. And she would wait. A decision formed in her mind, clear and bright as the spring day. He was dangerous, yes. Her instincts screamed it. But as she watched him stand there, a silent pillar in the swirling cherry blossoms, she did not believe he was a bad person. With her internal conflict settled, the childlike dragon resurfaced. She ran ahead through the falling petals, her voice ringing with excitement. Let's hurry. Back to their new home. For the first time in a long time, GD watched her go and felt, not happiness, but the cold satisfaction of a plan proceeding on schedule. It was, he conceded, a good start. He watched the blossom petals fall, each one a fleeting moment of peace. In his 6 previous lives, such moments were luxuries he couldn't afford, always lost in a sea of blood and failure. He closed his eyes. A single, quiet thought echoed in the vast expanse of his ancient mind. A measured assessment, devoid of hope or joy, but filled with cold, hard pragmatism. Not a bad start. The first of the 4 dragons had been secured. Her despair was managed. The first step on a long, 1,000-mile journey to avert the apocalypse was complete. But as a fragile peace was being nurtured in a small apartment in Korea, a different kind of storm was brewing. Half a world away, in the wastelands of the African continent, another dragon made her presence known. This was the red dragon, Uyorium. Summer. A being of pure, unrestrained aggression. She casually stood over her latest victim, not with the grim satisfaction of a warrior, but with the simple boredom of a predator whose prey offered no sport. The man, a desert warlord who once ruled thousands, could only scream as her boot descended. He had faced armies and won. But he had never faced a catastrophe in human form. There was no complex technique. No elegant swordsmanship. Just the absolute, overwhelming force of a god. The ground shattered under the impact, and the man's world was reduced to pain and then silence. Yoriam looked down at the broken body, a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. "He's not even a snack," she scoffed. The hunt was everything. The kill was meaningless if there was no struggle. She stood silhouetted against the full moon, lifting the wolf-like mask from her face. 199 fights. 199 victories. The wasteland had run out of challengers worthy of her time. A bloodthirsty grin spread across her face, her crimson eyes glowing with savage glee. The boredom was gone, replaced by an insatiable hunger for the next battle. She raised her mask, her voice a challenge to the empty night. "Who's next?" The world was on fire, as it always was. News reports scrolled across the screen, detailing another pointless conflict in a forgotten corner of the globe. A terrorist group, a civilian village turned to ruins, and a battlefield in South Africa. But amidst the predictable chaos, one name stood out, the Night Brawler, a mysterious teenage girl leaving a trail of broken bodies in her wake. Ujite watched the chaos unfold with cold, detached eyes. He had seen it all before, countless times across shattered timelines. The names and faces changed, but the inevitable march towards catastrophe was always the same. He closed the articles. It was time to start moving. A voice cut through his thoughts, sweet and deceptively innocent. "Mister, are you busy? Dinner's ready." It was the Green Dragon, UBOM. Another piece on the board, another potential cataclysm contained within his home. "I'm coming now," he replied, his voice betraying none of the weariness that settled deep in his bones. He should have known. He should have expected it. On the table sat a dish that defied all culinary logic, 2 whole fish, standing upright in a mound of ominous, purple glowing, something. It was one of Baum's creations, a testament to the fact that a godlike being could still be a toddler in the kitchen. Jite stared at the dish. His face was a mask of absolute neutrality, an expression perfected over 7 lifetimes of dealing with absurdities that could shatter a lesser man's sanity. The faint purple aura pulsed, a silent mockery of the concept of food. UBOM beamed with pride, completely oblivious to the culinary crime she had committed. "How is it? Looks good, right?" Her smile was bright, a stark contrast to the dark energy emanating from the bowl. In this timeline, her innocence was still intact. It was his job to keep it that way. She explained her process. She had seen a sardine dish in England and thought it would go well with rice. A simple, almost logical thought process that had inevitably led to this creation. Jite picked up his chopsticks, feeling the weight of his mission in this small, ridiculous moment. He lifted a spoonful to his mouth. The fish head stared back, its dead eyes screaming a single, silent plea, "Please kill me." Jite understood the sentiment completely. His eyes narrowed slightly. It was a familiar feeling. The quiet suffering, the acceptance of a foul task for the sake of a greater goal. Whether it was saving the world or eating this dinner, the principle was the same. He broke the silence, changing the subject before he had to take a bite. "Tomorrow, we're going to bring red." BOM looked up, her fork pausing mid-air. The name hung between them, a promise of violence and fire. Bomb's cheerful demeanor vanished, replaced by a rare seriousness. She knew the one he spoke of. But, bringing her back is going to be really hard, she warned. She won't follow you quietly like I did. If you go with me and persuade her, it won't be difficult, Jite stated, a calculated move. He needed Bomb's unique influence for this. Bom, however, was hesitant, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Will I really be helpful? Different clans tend to have a sense of distance, you know. Distance? Jite questioned, prompting her to explain. In his past lives, he had learned of their natures through blood-soaked experience. But hearing it from her gave it a new, more intimate context. Yes. Because what we want is different, Bomb explained, her gaze distant. I enjoy taking things slow and creating things, but the Red Clan is different. Her words painted a picture of fire and rage. A vision of the Red Dragon, Yoram, consumed by the thrill of battle. They like war and violence, and they enjoy showing off their strength. Using force to bring her back would be dangerous. Bomb's voice lowered, conveying the absolute gravity of the Red Clan's pride. It was a warrior's creed, something Jite understood all too well. To the Red Clan, surrender means something worse than death. Jite's expression hardened. The time for games was over. But if we don't bring the Red Dragon soon, it'll be dangerous, he stated, the cold facts leaving no room for argument. He revealed the true threat. Not from him, but from another hunter. Someone is targeting her. An image of a heavily armored warrior flashed in his mind. If things continue like this, Red will definitely die. He revealed the true threat. Not from him, but from another hunter. Someone is targeting her. An image of a heavily armored warrior flashed in his mind. If things continue like this, Red will definitely die. His eyes met hers, cold and unwavering. It was a request, not a command. A rare show of vulnerability he could only afford in front of her. So if you come with me, we can resolve it peacefully. I thought you were the type to shoulder everything alone no matter what. He offered no reply. There was nothing to say. She was right. In every other life, he had been alone. This time, things had to be different. Bomb's expression shifted, a playful but firm light in her eyes. She had found her leverage. You have to eat all the food I prepared, she declared, pointing at the cursed dish. I saw you quietly putting down your spoon when you brought up Red. A long, suffering sigh escaped him, so quiet it was almost imperceptible. He had faced gods and monsters. He had watched worlds burn. But in this moment, he was defeated by a plate of purple fish. Caught. A silent surrender. He picked up his spoon again, resigned to his fate. This small, absurd battle was one he had to lose to win the war. And as Jite faced his culinary doom, the very reason for it was carving a path of destruction across a continent. In a blood-soaked city in Africa, the Red Dragon, Yoram, stood over the aftermath of her latest victory. She was a whirlwind of violence, a catastrophe in human form. She sneered at the broken soldier on the ground. Humph, even the Papa guys are so weak. Contempt dripped from her voice. This was not a fight, it was a game, and her playthings were disappointingly fragile. Yoram surveyed the field of fallen soldiers. I didn't want to reach my 200th win in such a lame way. The thrill of victory was already fading, replaced by the familiar ache of boredom. She was a tempest with nothing to destroy. Her mind drifted, searching for a new challenge. Ah. Green is in Europe, right? A predatory smile touched her lips. A visit to her sister dragon sounded like the perfect cure for this monotony. Hiding behind shattered walls, the few remaining soldiers trembled. Their elite unit, wiped out by a single girl. One of them corrected the thought, his voice tight with terror, don't think of her as just a girl. She's a monster obsessed with fighting. Despair was a cold certainty. They were outmatched, their strength meaningless against her. The soldier clenched his jaw, a sliver of hope cutting through his fear. The backup had to be close. He'd better arrive soon. Yoram's head snapped in their direction, her senses sharper than any animal's. "Appas, what are you whispering about in the shadows?" She crouched, a predator ready to pounce, the air crackling with her bloodlust. The soldiers froze, their hearts seizing in their chests. A single word screamed in their minds. Run. The illusion of safety was shattered. There was no hiding from a monster like her. Their discipline broke, replaced by the primal instinct to survive. Too late. Her laugh was a shard of glass as she launched herself forward. The thrill of the hunt was back, a vicious grin spreading across her face under the mask. This was what she lived for. But then, something impossible happened. Her sword, aimed to finish them, was stopped cold. A blinding flash of golden mana erupted before her, solid as a fortress wall, and her blade was met with absolute resistance. She pushed. Nothing moved. It was like striking a mountain. The force of the impact jarred her arms, a shockwave traveling up her spine. For the first time in this entire blood-soaked skirmish, her attack had been completely nullified. Damn! Why is this mana so heavy? A grunt of pained surprise was forced from her lips. The casual arrogance was gone, replaced by disbelief. The sheer density of this power was unlike anything she had ever encountered. But Yoram was the red dragon. Disbelief quickly burned away into fury. With a wild scream, she poured every ounce of her own violent energy into her blade, determined to shatter this obstacle through sheer, brute force. The surviving soldiers could only watch in stunned silence. Their terror for her was momentarily replaced by awe. As she cut through the mana itself. What a monster! Even in the face of overwhelming power, her raw talent was undeniable. From the dust, a new figure emerged, his presence rewriting the laws of the battlefield. The soldiers cried out his name in relief and reverence, Javier. The true threat, the one GD knew was coming, had finally arrived. Clad in heavy, ornate armor and radiating an aura of absolute authority, the African Union superhuman, rank 8, Javier Karma, assessed the scene. His voice was calm, a stark contrast to the chaos. Gather the wounded and retreat. His glowing yellow eyes, burning like embers in the shadow of his hood, fixed on Yoram. He had deflected her attack with barely a thought. Yoram, however, merely brushed it off. You startled me, Appa. Taking off her mask, Yoram revealed her face, a smirk playing on her lips. She sized him up, the excitement returning to her eyes. That attack just now looked heavy and pretty strong, though. So you're the leader here? Javier remained unimpressed. I heard you were a girl, but you're younger than I expected. Yoram simply laughed, tossing her hair back with theatrical flair. Ehe, Appa, did you fall for me too? This is why I usually wear a mask. Her arrogance was boundless. A god-tier face, a distraction in battle. Javier's expression darkened, his patience wearing thin. He had felt her power, her raw, untamed talent. Yet she stood there, defiant. You must have felt the power difference. Yet you won't surrender? Yoram scoffed at the very idea. Run? Surrender? The concepts were alien to her. What are you saying? Why would I run away just because one weapon broke? To her, a weapon was a toy. The fight was everything. The air around her began to crackle, glowing with malevolent red energy. This was the creed of the Red Clan, an oath written in her very soul. Rather than running shamefully, I'd rather fucking die fighting. With a final, desperate roar, she unleashed all her remaining power, choosing a warrior's death over a coward's retreat. Her pride was absolute, even in the face of her own annihilation. She threw herself at him, not with a sword, but with her bare fists. It was a suicidal charge, a final act of defiance against a power she couldn't hope to match. But for the Red Dragon, it was the only way. In that last instant, her battle-honed instinct screamed, spotting a theoretical weakness. Even facing oblivion, her mind fixated on a single goal: land one perfect, final blow. She aimed low, for an opening that even gods might overlook. It was a move born of desperation and instinct. A dirty, underhanded strike aimed at a universal weakness. She put everything she had left into one, final, dishonorable blow, a groin punch. Her fist connected. And then, nothing. The impact was absorbed by the armor, a dull thud with no effect. Yoram's eyes went wide. The shock of the blow's failure was more stunning than any attack he could have landed on her. Her red-hot energy dissipated against his plating. He hadn't even flinched. The absolute, crushing reality of the power difference settled in. She wasn't fighting a soldier anymore, she was punching a mountain. Javier looked down at her, his voice devoid of emotion. "Looks like you have never fought someone stronger than you. I bet every fight you've had felt like a game, easy and fun." His words were sharper than any blade, cutting down her pride. "Your talent is impressive, but..." He continued, a teacher lecturing a reckless student. In his eyes, she wasn't a monster. She was just a child who had never been told no. He drew his massive sword, the golden hilt gleaming. The time for lessons was over. "I'm not someone who'll play your little games." With a speed that defied the weight of his armor, he brought the blade down. It wasn't an attack meant to test or disable. It was an execution. A wave of golden mana screamed towards her, an absolute judgment she had no hope of dodging. He invoked the name of his power, a name that carried the weight of a god. Sword of Ra. Light and heat exploded from the blade, a miniature sun brought to bear on the battlefield. His glowing yellow eyes promised annihilation. This was the power of a rank 8 superhuman. Not a wild, chaotic force like Yoram's, but a focused, disciplined, and overwhelming river of mana, controlled with lethal precision. **T. I can't dodge this. Panic, a foreign and hated emotion, flared in Yoram's chest. For the first time, she was not the predator. She was the prey, and the hunter had her cornered. The beam of light struck. The earth shattered. The world became a storm of golden energy and pulverized stone, and Yoram was thrown back like a discarded doll, her body swallowed by the blast. Her body slammed into a concrete wall, the structure cracking under the sheer force of the impact. The fight was over. The monster had been slain. Javier lowered his sword, observing the result. In that instant she reinforced her arm and blocked it, definitely not an ordinary kid. Even in her defeat, her talent was shocking. He would have to increase his output to ensure the kill. But as the dust settled, a flicker of movement, or rather the lack of it, caught his attention. Huh! He turned towards the crater his attack had made. It was empty. Before Javier could react, a flash of green UBOM appeared from thin air, her hand clamped over a shocked and wounded Yoram's mouth. She had snatched the red dragon from the jaws of death, an act of quiet, impossible speed. "Green? Why are you here?" Yoram sputtered, her mind reeling from the defeat and the sudden rescue. BOM simply put a finger to her lips with a calm smile. A silent command to be quiet. She had arrived just as Jite planned. A gentle, glowing green energy flowed from Bom's hands, stitching together Yoram's wounds with impossible speed. "If you keep fighting, you might actually die," Bomb stated, her tone a mix of gentle chiding and serious warning. It was the simple, undeniable truth. Yoram slapped her hand away, her pride wounded more than her body. "Hey, Green. I told you not to interfere when it comes to fighting." Whether I die or not is none of your business. I'm fighting to the end. Bom looked at her, not with pity, but with a strange, calculating logic only another dragon could understand. Red. If you die, our entertainment ends too. Yoram froze. What? Bom looked at her, not with pity, but with a strange, calculating logic only another dragon could understand. Red. If you die, our entertainment ends too. Yoram froze. What? As her healing energy flowed, Bom explained her twisted reasoning. Your death isn't yours alone. You don't want our fun to end either, do you? It wasn't an appeal to friendship. It was an appeal to their shared, selfish desire to continue existing in this interesting, fragile world. I still want to stay on Earth. You'll cooperate, right, Red? Bom asked, her smile sweet and her eyes holding an unyielding pressure. It was a perfect piece of manipulation, framing survival as a means to continue their game. Yoram was silent. Her warrior's pride had no answer for this logic. Die for honor? Or live for fun? It was a childish argument, and yet, in the face of her own mortality, it was strangely compelling. Defeated and confused, Yoram finally relented. So what, should we just run away together? That guy is insanely strong. Even if we run, he'll catch us fast. Bom just kept smiling, her confidence unshaken. The old man will probably handle it. Old man? Yoram asked, her expression a mixture of irritation and confusion. The title was so mundane. So unfitting for the gravity of their situation. And just as Bom predicted, the old man appeared. Ujite stepped onto the battlefield, his presence a calm void in the heart of the storm. He stood before the armored superhuman, not as a combatant, but as an inevitability. Javier Karma's glowing eyes narrowed. This man had appeared from nowhere, his energy signature completely masked until the last second. He was an unknown variable in a situation that had been under his absolute control. Who are you? He demanded. Jite didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply existed, a quiet declaration that the rules of this world no longer applied. He met the superhuman's gaze with eyes that had seen the end of all things. Then, he gave his simple, world-shattering answer. Her guardian. But the confrontation was cut short by a new, unexpected arrival. A young girl with hair the color of spun gold appeared nearby, drawn by the lingering scent of Bom's power. That's strange. She murmured to herself. It smells like green, but you aren't green. Jite turned, his expression of weary resignation returning in full force. He had seen this before. Another one. Another catastrophe in the making, walking up to him with the innocence of a child. The gold dragon approached him without an ounce of fear, her golden eyes wide with curiosity. Mister, who are you? She beamed, a smile of pure, unadulterated curiosity on her face. Her question was simple, yet it struck at the very heart of his existence, his methods, and his impossible goal. You're not a bad person, right? In his 7th life, Ujiti had grown weary of interruptions. This was another one. An armored fool, radiating self-importance, stood before him questioning his presence. The man was Javier Karma, an investigator from the SAN Association, and he was becoming an obstacle. Watching from a safe distance were two of the very reasons for Jiti's eternal struggle. Ubom, the green dragon, ever the cautious observer, tried to pull the other one back. But the red dragon, a being of pure, aggressive energy who would come to be known as Yoram, was captivated by the confrontation. Javier Karma, oblivious to the true nature of the beings before him, dismissed Jiti's attempt at a peaceful resolution. His voice was firm. He was blinded by his duty. He was about to make a fatal mistake. The investigator declared that Red, the girl Jiti was there to protect, had crossed a line. Jiti's response was cold and simple. she didn't kill anyone. For him, the complexities of human law were trivial compared to the catastrophe he was trying to prevent. Javier Karma refused to listen. He demanded that GD stop playing word games. He was a man operating on a script GD had seen countless times before, a script that always ended in that man's own ruin. GD's patience, a resource more finite than time itself, was wearing thin. He met the investigator's gaze with an expression of profound annoyance. "Let this go quietly," he suggested, offering one last chance the man was too foolish to take. The offer was, predictably, refused. Javier Karma tightened his grip on his sword, his entire being radiating indignation. He truly believed he was in control of this situation. With a surge of golden energy, Javier Karma leaped into the air. He declared the area under his jurisdiction. It was a formal declaration of war, a challenge GD had no choice but to answer with absolute finality. Announcing his intent to arrest all of them, the investigator activated his power. The air itself seemed to hum with gathering energy, a spectacle GD had witnessed 1,000 times before in his previous lives. It was powerful, but ultimately, insignificant. A massive wave of golden energy erupted from the investigator's blade, tearing through the ground as it shot towards GD. A display of power meant to shock and awe. A move designed to end the fight before it began. The dust settled. The investigator stood amidst the ruin his attack had created, the battlefield itself now shattered. He scanned the area, confident in his victory. He believed an attack of that magnitude should have been more than enough. He reasoned that if GD was truly the guardian of a monster, he should have survived. It never occurred to him that the attack might simply have failed. Then, a voice from behind. How frustrating. GD appeared from the shadows, completely untouched, his dark aura swirling around him like a cloak. For him, this was not a battle, it was a chore. GD's voice was laced with disappointment. He questioned how someone ranked 8th among superhumans could be so utterly inflexible. It wasn't a real question, it was a condemnation. A wave of absolute shock washed over Javier Karma's face. The laws of physics had been broken. The impossible had happened. In that moment, he finally understood he was not the predator in this exchange. In a desperate last stand, the investigator summoned his ultimate weapon. The Sword of Ra. A blade of legend, imbued with divine, sun-scorching power. But against the abyss that was GD, even the sun's power is just a flicker. The divine blade was stopped. Effortlessly. Its brilliant light was smothered by the encroaching darkness of GD's power. GD now stood behind the disarmed investigator, a hand on his shoulder. It was over. But defeat was not enough. To ensure this never happened again, GD needed to instill something more permanent than failure. He needed to instill fear. "Today is the unluckiest day of your life," GD whispered, his voice a chilling poison in the investigator's ear. The lesson was about to begin. GD began to dictate a new memory. A new truth. He explained that while taking the child into custody, the investigator had the misfortune of encountering an unidentified monster. He continued the fabrication, his words weaving a tapestry of failure and pain. "You were unlucky. You failed to counter its attack. As a result, you lost both your arms and your eyes, allowing the monster and the child to escape." This would be Javier Karma's new, blood-soaked history. As the investigator tried to resist, to scream, GD's hand glowed with a terrifying light. He was not just speaking words, he was carving them into the man's very soul, overriding reality itself. GD knew the SAN organization had healers. They could fix the investigator's arms. They could restore his sight. The physical damage was temporary and ultimately meaningless. However, the mind was a different matter. The fear, once planted in the fertile soil of a shattered ego, would become absolute. It would be a permanent, ingrained scar that no healer could ever mend. Fear is efficient. It is a tool that transcends timelines and guarantees compliance. And in his 7 lifetimes of suffering, it was a method Ujiri had come to favor for dealing with any obstacle, human or otherwise. For instance, take the being in front of him. This violent baby dragon, who called herself the Brawler of the Night, was no exception to his methods. Red could only stare, her bravado shattered. The man who had just dismantled a top-ranked investigator without breaking a sweat was now the sole focus of her terror. She turned to Bomb, asking what kind of monster Jidi truly was. Bom corrected her gently. He's not a monster, he's a human. But Red, a being of instinct and power, refused to believe it. If that was a human, she scoffed, then she was a lizard. With the threat neutralized, Jidi turned his cold, unwavering attention to his true target. Red Dragon. His voice left no room for argument. From now on, you will live with me, in my house, under my protection. He offered her a deal that sounded like salvation. He promised her freedom. He promised her support. He walked toward her, leaving the broken investigator in the dust behind him, his words a stark contrast to the violence she just witnessed. And then, the hidden clause. But if you step outside my boundaries. His face transformed. The veneer of calm cracked, revealing the absolute, terrifying killing intent he kept simmering just beneath the surface. Seeing Red completely frozen with fear, Bom, ever the manipulative genius, decided to intervene. She wrapped her arms around the trembling Red Dragon, playing the part of the comforting friend to ease the tension of this coerced recruitment. While Red was having a full-blown panic attack, freaking out about Jidi's creepy threat, Bom simply gave a playful wink. For her, this was just another Tuesday. Another step in a plan she understood far better than the warrior she held in her arms. Jidi watched them in silence. The hot and cold, the threat and the comfort, it was all part of the process. A necessary, if annoying, series of steps to manage these godlike toddlers and prevent another world-ending catastrophe. He then gave his final decree. Her old life was over. Her new one had just begun. From now on, your name is Uyorium, he stated, already walking away as if the matter was completely settled. As Jidi departed, Bomb couldn't resist a bit of teasing, pointing out that Red seemed to have gotten bigger. Still reeling from the whiplash of terror and confusion, Yoriam angrily told her she wasn't in the mood for jokes. Jidi looked up towards the sky, his expression unreadable. His part in this particular drama was over. He touched a finger to his temple, a wisp of dark energy connecting him to a mind far away. Reporting, he thought, the situation is resolved. The scene shifts. The narrative splits. At that very same moment, deep within the Amazon rainforest, a perfect clone of Ujidi sat with another target, a cheerful, blonde girl with the unmistakable aura of a gold dragon. The clone received the mental report from the original. You've done well, he thought back, before adding, I'll wrap up here soon and head back. For Jidi, saving the world was a logistical operation, executed with cold, parallel efficiency. Back at the primary location, Jidi reflected on the Red Dragon's volatile personality. She was a brute. He knew that persuading her would have been difficult for his clone alone, acknowledging that sending the more diplomatic Ubom was the correct strategic decision. Meanwhile, in the Amazon, the gold dragon tilted her head with childlike curiosity. She had noticed the clone's momentary distraction. Mister, she asked, who were you just talking to? The clone brushed it off as nothing. The gold dragon, easily distracted, simply giggled, assuming he was talking to himself and pointing out that his smartwatch was on his wrist, not near his mouth. Her innocence was a stark contrast to the dark complexities of Jidi's mission. Jidi knew her type all too well. It was typical of the Gold Dragon clan. They were born loving attention, thriving in the spotlight like a flower soaking in the sun. He had seen this play out before. In 3 of his 6 past regressions, this very dragon had lived a brilliant life, becoming a world-famous idol adored by billions. But the one who shone brighter than anyone else, was inevitably also the dragon that caused the most apocalypses. Her despair, born from the pressures of fame, had plunged the world into blood-soaked ruin more than once. For the gold dragon, the attention and love of the masses was a rose. It was beautiful and glamorous, but it always came with the poison of its thorns. And that, Jidi mused, was likely why she was hiding in such a remote place. Even her desire for amusement was tempered by the trauma of past lives. The gold dragon, meanwhile, was simply captivated by the clone's floating holographic screen. She marveled at the floating screen, twirling with the delight of a child seeing magic. For a being whose very nature craved stimulation, this simple technology was a source of immense wonder, a perfect distraction from her self-imposed exile. The clone saw his opening. Her fascination was the key. He broke the silence with a question that was both simple and pointed, gesturing to the untamed wilderness around them. You. Why would someone seeking amusement choose a place like this? The clone pressed his advantage, pointing out that for someone seeking amusement, a jungle filled with beasts and insects was a strange choice. She was taken aback, shocked that this stranger knew the secret reason she had left her home. He explained that he heard it from the green dragon. The gold dragon's suspicion instantly vanished, replaced by explosive excitement. She had smelled green on him from the start, and now she understood he was a friend of a friend. His eyes narrowed slightly. He had confirmed her identity and her connection to the others. He now had the full picture. Gold dragon, he thought, his plans solidifying. The clone then asked the critical question, the one that exposed the trauma he already knew was there from his past lives. Are you scared of people now? The gold dragon recoiled as if struck. She became flustered, her fingers fidgeting nervously. It wasn't that she was scared, exactly, but she had tried living among people before, and it hadn't gone well. She explained the real reason for her isolation. When she lived in the city, strange, shadowy figures would look at her funny. They would follow her. To a being as powerful as a dragon, it was an unsettling, frightening experience. She concluded her story with a sad smile. That's what happened. Jidi's clone listened in silence, his expression unchanging. He had confirmed her vulnerability. Now, it was time to exploit it. He changed the subject with a question so unexpected it completely bypassed her defenses. Do you like bread? The gold dragon, still lost in her sad memories, could only blink, confused by the bizarre pivot. Without waiting for an answer, the clone raised a finger. A portal ripped open in reality, leading to the shallowest part of the abyss, a personal subspace with enough capacity to swallow an entire city. From this void, a shadowy, multi-limbed construct emerged, holding a simple paper bag. The gold dragon stared, her mouth agape. She had seen magic before, but nothing like this. Her golden eyes, once filled with a distant sadness, were now wide with pure, unadulterated shock. Inside the bag was an impossible sight. An assortment of perfectly baked breads and pastries, shining as if they had just been pulled from an oven. She couldn't believe her eyes. It's real bread? The aroma was intoxicating. She asked if it was really for her. With a single word, yes, the clone sealed the deal, offering the bag to her. In her overwhelming excitement, she fumbled the bag, spilling its contents. Donuts. Blueberry egg tarts. An entire bakery's worth of treasures lay before her, a feast in the middle of the jungle. With her defenses shattered by sugar and shock, the clone pressed his final offer. Gold dragon. Don't just stay here like this, he commanded softly. Come with me. As she happily stuffed her face with the unexpected treats, he laid out his terms. He had friends. It would be safe. She could finally enjoy her amusement like the other dragons. For a brief moment, a flicker of hesitation. With pastry crumbs on her face, she mumbled a piece of ingrained wisdom, a final defense against the stranger's kindness. My mom told me not to follow strangers. The clone looked away, his expression cold and calculating. He knew her weakness. He knew the one thing that could override a mother's warning. He delivered the final, devastating blow to her willpower. I'll buy you macarons, too. Checkmate. Her mind went blank. The promise of macarons, on top of everything else, was an attack she simply could not withstand. Her resistance crumbled. The gold dragon had been acquired.